Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining for another very exciting series episode of the four-part PM job search special series. My name is Shavi. I'm the host for today. Really excited to see everyone here. Please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. Really excited to see you. And now, just to recap, in case you're new, hopefully many of you have joined the previous series, but I'm running a very special four-part series with Phil Terry, the author of Never Search Alone, the book on his right-hand side. Phil is also the founder of Collaborative Game and has devoted the last 25 years to help top talents in the internet and product management world build great product companies and careers. Phil had spent 400 iterations to make this book perfect for you, just like how we would develop a product, different MVP tests, different iteration. So really excited to be here today again with you, Phil, and with many other fans as well. So please continue to say hi and drop in the chat where you're joining us from.
It's great to see everybody. Wow, look at the range, Shivi. India,
Lots of
Malaysia,
folks.
Switzerland, San Francisco.
Miami, Canada, a lot of folks from Utah, Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So just a quick recap. About 4 weeks ago, we kicked off our first session with our wonderful guest, the Marty Kagan. We talk about the power of never search alone, why you should form communities, and some special consideration for PM job search. If you want to rewatch the session, just go to the details tab on the events, and there are links to all the previous events. And so to recap, right, never search alone consists of 3 big ideas. So about 2 weeks ago, we kicked off the first formal conversation about how to form and lead a job search console, and why we all need one to improve job search success, and that social accountability and how it benefits, otherwise very jarring, process, emotionally draining process. And then last week, we talked about the second big component, which is about finding candidate market fit, just like finding product market fit for product managers, right? So how do you land good jobs at the intersection of hopes, dreams, and market reality? So if you want to, again, rewatch some of this conversation, make sure you go to the details tab, and with links to go to the former session, all the replays are available. And today we're going to have another really, really important conversation. Is the third part of the never search alone approach, which is about how do you negotiate your job offer beyond compensation, and then negotiated all 4 legs of the negotiation stool. So including comps, budget, resources, and support to really set yourself up for success. As part of our discussion, we'll also touch upon important things like networking and how do you get opportunities to land interviews, right? And then how you ace the interview and eventually negotiating beyond the money. So really excited to get started with so many of you today. Please continue to jump in the chat, say hi, where you're joining us from, any questions you might have regarding job negotiation, networking, and interviews. Before we dive in, let me just pass it over to Phil, who can say a few words about some of the resources available for all the job seekers out there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Shivi. And thanks for this 4-part series. It's really been wonderful to do this with you. I just want to say, wow, we've got Egypt, Ghana, Madrid, Spain, Lahore, Pakistan. Welcome, all of you. I'm so glad everyone from around the world is here. You deserve a better job, and you deserve to be set up to succeed, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, how to be set up to succeed. And in terms of resources, the good news is you only need to remember 4 letters, and you see it right there, phil.org. I'm going to put it in the chat. Everything you need is there. Free job search. If you want to join a job search council for free, we'll match you and set you up. If you want videos of all the videos we've done here on LinkedIn, you can go and watch the videos. If you want to see, if you want to download the free tools, go to phil.org. It's everything you need is phil.org. That's the only thing you need to remember today. We have a big volunteer community, a community of volunteers all over the world who are hoping and helping to make your job search a success. We're having a lot of fun, and it's bringing a lot of joy to everybody to do this. All right. So that's my few words about that. Shivi, is that good?
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Phil. All right. Remember, everybody, Phil.org, four letter word. All right. I can't wait to introduce our guest. So let me bring Andy and Gracia to the stream. All right. So Andy is a product and design leader at JP Morgan Chase with the goal of making software engineers' lives as happy and as productive as possible with a passion for the customer experience and solving complex problems. Andy is a builder at heart with a passion for shaping culture, building world-class teams, and elevating teams and individual performance. So welcome, Andy. Very noble passion.
Yeah, thank you, Shivi. It's great to be here with everybody today.
Awesome. And then next up, Gracia is the product designer with 10 years of experience in the design. Over the years, she has taken opportunities ranging from small startups to enterprise companies, media companies, and agencies. Currently, Gracia works at Dropbox on the Dropbox password manager, and then before Dropbox, Gracia worked in the Washington Post as principal product designer. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this topic about networking and negotiation. So happy to be here.
Awesome. We have a jam-packed list of questions today and topics to talk about, ranging from, again, networking, interviewing, all the way to negotiating. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. So everybody knows how important it is to network in order to get a good job, right? Because, resume screening is just a very cold and ruthless process. It's lacking this human touch. Whereas if you find a way to be able to connect with the recruiter or the hiring team, specifically the hiring manager, you have a much better chance to at least, tell your story and, to not get the ATS just screen you out and not having an opportunity to shine. So I wanted to ask, maybe starting from Theo and then Andy and Gracia, what would be some of the best strategies and tips for networking to find a job, especially I think for people who might be introverts, who might be very scared of networking and might be also very fear of thinking of networking to ask for a job as being very transactional. So they're have this mental block of I want to get a good job, but I'm not comfortable putting myself out there. So help us unpack this a little bit.
So and Andy and Gracia help me elaborate here, and they know this, the good news is the never search alone method is great for introverts because it's about relationship building and building support. So by the time you get, one of the big ideas is, hey, you've got to pause for a moment, figure out your candidate market fit. You do this before you network and interview. Get really clear on what you want, like we were talking about last week. When you have that clarity, right, then you go back to all the people you asked for help from in developing your candidate market fit. You've built relationships with them, you deepen relationships with them, and you ask for their help in finding and talking to more people. 85% of the jobs come from the hidden job market. It's not from applying, sort of blind to a website. It comes from building relationships and building a community and a village of support around yourself and getting clear about what you want, that candidate market fit. Because when you have that clarity, it becomes easy for others to act as listening posts. Really important idea in the book. You need people to be listening posts for you, but they can only do that if they know you're looking for a VP of product job at a Fortune 500 company, which is more or less, I think, Andy, what your candidate market fit was, if I remember that correctly, right?
That's right.
Not a startup, not a Series A, not a marketing role, not that you would do that, but, a VP of product, with a certain scope of work, right? So having that clarity then allows you to build relationships and deepen them and get the word out that, hey, on LinkedIn, one of the things we do is, Shivi, LinkedIn's awesome for this. Once you have clarity about your candidate market fit, you post it on LinkedIn. You post your candidate market fit statement, say, I'm now clear. This is what I'm looking for. And woo, your network comes alive. It's fantastic, right? But only do that once you have that understanding. And then doors start to open. And again, you do go back to the people you've built relationships with. I teach a lot about how to build relationships. I tell people I don't like networking. When I think of networking, I think of like going to a cocktail party with nobody I know. Like that's it. That's like the definition of hell for me. Okay. I would, but going to talk to Gracia, who I know, or Andy, who I know, or you, Shivi, who I know, and building that relationship, that's really different. Right. And that's a lot what we teach in the book, and that asking for help triggers that. And we can get more into that. But those are a few comments. Let's really, shall we turn it over to Andy and Gracia now? Shivi, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Andy, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, just to double click on that, Phil, what I'd say is that I'm also like, I'm a huge introvert. I'm not the person that's going to go to the networking happy hour kind of a thing, but I'd say very similar to what you talked about. For me, it's all about making those connections, developing those relationships. And maybe just to double click into a couple of things you talked about, maybe just to use a little vignette here. Hey, I know Phil really well, but Phil knows Gracia really well. So I can go talk to Phil and say, hey, would you mind doing an introduction to Gracia at Dropbox, who's seems to be the hiring manager or a member at this community? Because I'd really love to talk with her about, this role that I'm interested in. And so I think using your connections and your relationships to help you create some of those introductions, and really doing an assessment of, if there's a certain set of companies that you'd really like to work at, do you know people, or do the folks in your network know people at those companies, and can they do warm introductions for you just to get the conversation and the connection going? And to Shivi, your comment about moving past the resume screening, would they be open to spending a half an hour with me just to talk about the role and my candidacy? I've seen work really well.
Can I add one piece to that, which is so important? And I talk about this in the book: permission-based introductions. So Andy, if you come to me and say, hey, would you introduce me to Gracia at Dropbox? And I say yes. The next step is not to introduce the two of you. The next step is to ask Gracia, hey, Gracia, Andy, who is a VP of product at the time at Target, is thinking about this next thing, whatever. Would you be willing to have a conversation with Andy? Almost everyone says yes, especially when you ask for permission, and then you make the introduction. This is a mistake I see so many people make. Don't do the cold introduction. It often doesn't go anywhere. Do a permission-based introduction. This is a little tactic, but it's one that really can matter. Yeah. Gracia, what would you add? Like, both you and Andy know how anxiety producing it is to look for another job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think I definitely lean more on the introverted side, but I think creating those connections up front is everything. I can recall a time I was at a networking event and I made a connection with someone. And at the time I was doing more of the visual part of design, and I wanted to go into UX, and I made that connection, got their email, and followed up right after. And I said, it was great talking. When I'm interested, I would love to chat one-on-one. And what actually happened was, months later, there was an opportunity, and I reached out, and I ended up working with him like a couple of weeks later. So foster, really taking care of that relationship is really key, I think.
So can we double click?
No, go ahead, Shivi. Go ahead.
Can we double click on that a little bit, Gracia? Like, when you say nurture that relationship, like, tell us a little bit about, like, what kind of things do you discuss the first time you meet? And then, like, how do you then continue to, you said a couple months later, right? Like, how often do you need to check in with that relationship? And like, what are some tactical steps you would do there?
Yeah, I think for me, it was after I met them, I followed up and I reiterated what really was interesting for me in that conversation. What stood out for me, he followed up and said, hey, this is like, I'm really excited you're into UX. Definitely reach out. And then it was a couple months later, I said, hey, want to meet up? Can we talk about this? I wasn't like, hey, I'm looking for a job immediately. I kind of like went in and kind of created that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And to add to that, so in the book, we talk about, hey, as I mentioned before, you're going to take some time to figure out your candidate market fit. You're going to ask for help before you begin the formal networking and interviewing. But everyone you've talked to help you think about what job you want, I say keep them updated. Even if you don't have an update, like you can say, once a month or every 2 weeks, like, hey, Gracia, on email, I just wanted to let you know again, that conversation was so helpful. I'm continuing to think through this. I haven't made a decision yet, but I just wanted to let you know I'm continuing to think about what you just talked to me about, and it's resonating with me. And I'll be back in touch soon. And you don't expect them to necessarily respond, but people love that. People love that. The thing we forget in the job search is that if we ask for help well, if we follow up, we say thank you, it brings joy to the other people. You can actually spread joy in your job search. When you're feeling anxious, you can spread joy, and joy is a great thing in the world, right? So I emphasize this in the book. And by the way, now with Chat GPT and other tools, if you don't know how to write a follow-up or a thank you note, go to Chat GPT and say, hey, give me a follow-up note with these 3 things, and it'll give you a first draft. And then you can edit from there. How cool is that? Right? It is awesome. There's no reason now not to do that. And you will spread joy. And then, and you will keep yourself top of mind with other people. And then, Gracia, when you get back to that person, say, now I'm clarity, I'm looking for a product design role. I want to be in a pure play, public, traded company in Silicon Valley, whatever it was, your candidate market fit. Then I'm like, okay, wow. Okay. Now, the next time I hear anything like that, I'm going to think of Gracia. That clarity and that follow-up is so key. These are very simple ideas, by the way, right? This is not rocket science. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. I just want to say hi to a couple more folks. I think Conci from Barcelona, who's been enjoying this series. So thank you for joining. And then there are a lot of fans with the Job Search Council numbers, and I'm assuming they're part of the family already joining us. So thank you so much. I have one more follow-up question, and then I think we'll move on to talk about interviews. I think a lot of folks understand the importance that we need a network and start building those relationships before we need it, right? Yeah. But with the massive layoff nowadays, things come really fast, before they even have time to react, really prepare and be proactive about it. Do you 2 or 3 have any sort of tips, some practical tips on what to do now when there's a lot more seekers out there in the market looking for jobs, and maybe you still need a network, but the competition is just a lot higher and you need to connect with more people? Yeah,
I think that's a fantastic point. But I'd say that back to what Phil was saying earlier, if you know your market fit and you know your candidate fit, you're not competing with everyone, right? So I think just and so noted that there's a lot of people out searching for jobs these days. But if you understand what you want and you understand what your candidate market fit is, you're not necessarily out competing with everyone. I would say what I've seen, if your network is cold and you haven't done what Gracia was speaking to in terms of keeping things warm on a regular basis, I found that just being super upfront and open with people in terms of hey, here's my life situation, here's where I'm at. Would have loved to have kept things going with you previously, but I am in a position of need right now, and would really like to have a conversation with you about how you might be able to help me. And I'd love to take this as a learning for me and help you on the backside of any assistance you might be able to provide me. And again, just the notion of making the connection and offering that help in another way is a way to open the door to hey, I actually do need a role right now. This might feel a little bit more transactional, but just being super direct and open about your situation. I found most people are hey, I get it. Life is busy, but let me see what I can do to help you out.
Such a great point, Andy. Yeah, you can. Gracia, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely, that's right on. I think a lot of times, specifically for design, there's so many types of design. So once you narrow it down exactly what you want and the market you're looking for in, then people can be a lot more helpful when they know exactly what that is. So yeah, plus one to what Andy said.
Yeah, I love that focus, that clarity, and then the abundance mindset that comes from that, right? You're not competing with everybody in the market. And I also love the awareness of just being upfront. That's almost more welcoming and better than you're trying to hide and just trying to ask for a network when you didn't have time to check in. So I like the being upfront part as well, setting expectations. All right. Now let's transition into the second part of our talk today about interviewing. So let's say right now people are looking for like different type of jobs to interview, and you know, a lot of times you can spend a lot of time, you know, trying to research and study a company and being super prepared. But there's also, you know, there's, I call it productive rabbit hole, because you can spend tons and tons of time studying. So for folks who are maybe preparing for multiple interviews at a time, what are some sort of high leverage way, like what's the 80-20 rule, that you spend kind of 20% of effort preparing for like 80% to get you to a good spot, and start interviewing for companies? How do you strive the balance between like really quality research and efficiency, and, you know, not putting all your eggs in one basket with one company, right, but trying to kind of like, you know, spread your bets? Anyone have sort of best practice tips, personal experience to share?
I'm happy to discuss this because, of course, I talk about it in the book, but I'd like to pause and see what Andy and Gracia might want to say first, as folks who've done this recently.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know how exactly to split it up, but I think, like you said, you can really go into that like direction where you're just focusing alone. But I think like the book has paired interview preparation. And I think when you talk about this with someone, talk about the direction you're looking into, have that conversation, it changes everything. I definitely can think back interviewing where I was like, I'm going to write down, I'm going to prepare, you know, and do everything. But it is really different when you prepare and talk to someone else, even someone else in the field. I think is really helpful in the field you're in, when preparing and practicing that interviewing versus just doing it all on your own.
Yeah, so important.
Plus one to what Gracia said. I think, you know, and just understanding, I'd say that the basics of the company, like what do they value? How do they make money? You know, what's their financial situation? You can do, you know, internet searches, Google searches on these things and get a sense for these things fairly quickly. But I really love the notion of sitting down and just talking through what you understand about a particular company and the types of things that you want to offer and vice versa. And that really helps you, I would say, isolate and prioritize the key questions and things that you want to learn about the company as well as your candidacy there.
Yeah. And so big mindset change for most people is you are in the driver's seat when you're interviewing, not the company, you as the candidate. Put yourself in the driver's seat. I'm putting you in charge. Okay. Which means do the research, do the prep. The paired interview prep is so powerful, Gracia. I'm glad you said that. And if you start to go 2-3 interviews down and it's starting to look good, then one of the best tools in the book is what we call the job mission with OKRs. You write your own job description. We call it the job mission with OKRs. You write an actionable job description with objectives and key results, OKRs, that say, this is what I think this job is and what I'm going to be accountable for. And then it will drive interview questions. That's the first benefit of it. The second benefit is that once you have a decent draft, you show it to the hiring manager, it will blow them away. They'll be like, what? You know, and it will then help you get alignment. How many people have taken a job who thought your job was A, but it turns out to have been B, right? This will help get alignment on both sides. Because I'll tell you a secret, most companies don't really know what they're doing when they're hiring. They're not sure what exactly they're looking for. So you have to take charge. And then it sets you up to negotiate, which we'll talk about in a moment. But Andy and Gracia, can you both talk about the job mission with OKRs and what that was like in your recent job search?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, you know, just what you were saying, Phil, is that after you've gone through a few interviews and you're getting a sense for what the role is, the culture, the environment, what I did is I sat down and I wrote, you know, my job mission, a blurb at the top, like here's what I think the role is and the boundary of its scope. And then to your point, from, you know, a compensation, a support or resources perspective, these are the kinds of things I think I'm going to need. And really just fleshed it out. And I basically looked at it in my first year to think of, like, if we were sitting here a year from now and I was going to accomplish these things, like, would that be a strong fit with your expectations? And I've got to be honest with you, Phil, the first time I sent a job mission, I was kind of like, so I hit send, right?
So pause right there. because everyone feels this way.
Yeah.
Explain that. What was this? Explain that.
Well, I was like, oh, do they think I'm presumptive, that I'm already getting the job and I don't really have, do I have the job completely wrong? And then I realized, was like, well, that's actually a good thing. Like if I send them my job mission and their expectation and mine are really different, we should have that conversation before, any kind of an offer conversation would come up. And so as I've gone through the interview process, I've gotten more comfortable of, sending job missions as I get into final rounds.
Let's go back to the first time you sent it. You were really anxious. Oh
yeah,
my God.
super anxious. Yeah.
And then what was the response?
The response was like, "Oh, can we talk tomorrow?" So I got an email back from the hiring manager, just a few hours later, and said, "Hey, I'd really love to schedule time with you tomorrow to talk through this." Yeah. So we even just like hopped over the recruiting process, right, in a lot of ways, and they wanted to sit down and talk through it and give feedback and talk about the structure. So I would say, at least for me, it's largely been a very successful tool in just confirming my understanding, but then also to your point, the fact that you take the time to go through it shows a lot of initiative and a lot of engagement in the role itself. And I think that's not lost on hiring managers for candidates that do that.
Yeah. Gracia, did you do this as well? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I used it more in as a basis of a lot of the questions I asked, as I was more of a discovery tool in a sense. So for me, culture is really important, right? So am I asking those right questions? Or if I'm going into a new area, what are those things that I need to be successful to help ramp me up? Do I need to go to a conference, right? Or and it helped me really see the whole picture of how can I set myself up for success in this new role.
That's great. Were you anxious too in showing it to the hiring manager?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of that feeling, are you doing too much before you're hired, kind of thing. But at the same time, I think it's aligning from the beginning, which I think is super important.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Shivy,
I think I just want to touch upon, I feel like a couple of things could really help this process. One is, like you said, feel like refrain your mindset from I am being like the victim or like the recipient of this interview process to I'm putting myself in the driver's seat. But in order not to come across as like presumptuous, like I knew this job, this is what I'm going to do. Like, and I like Gracia's framing of like, this is a discovery tool. You almost like PMing your job interview process, right? Like here's some assumptions test that I put down.
A brilliant way to put it.
Can I validate?
Can I
validate my hypothesis, right? And so I think LinkedIn, one of the LinkedIn users, really loving this approach. But I do want to double down on a couple of things. First, at what stage of the interview process would you say you are comfortable sending that job mission? And I know, Andy, you mentioned about you send it over email. Do you recommend to like bring it up during interview or send it beforehand? What was the tactic for like, making sure you frame it in such a way that it doesn't come across as like, I already got this job and here's what I think I'm going to do?
That's a fantastic question. So the way that I've done this or seen it done and talk with people about is once you go through those, that first round, or maybe you just have one round where you're meeting with 3 or 4 people, just the hook and kind of usually there's kind of a regroup or an update at the end or with the last person that you're interviewing with, and just really kind of proposing it there to say, hey, super excited about the role, really love what I'm seeing. I'd love to do a job mission, send that over to you and the hiring manager to get feedback and have a subsequent discussion to make sure that, I took away, to Gracia's point, the due diligence of the discovery and, validating our hypotheses about what this role is, and just really whatever that, what you feel is that end moment, whether it's, maybe you do 3 or 4 interviews and then there's a decision to be made, or if you're somebody who's going through multiple rounds of interviews, I've usually done it towards the end of the multiple rounds or the end of the interview process to just use it as a way to say, do I understand this role well and my skills and vice versa, and introducing it with the last person you're interviewing with, as well as the HR partner you might be working with.
And to underline what Gracia said, you can start to form it early on and not share it, but use it as a way to drive the questions the discovery tool, the way Shivy, we're now going to call it the job mission with OKRs is a discovery tool as well as a negotiations tool. You nailed it. That's awesome. And everyone I ever talked to, thousands and thousands of people are nervous about sharing that job mission with OKRs. And 999 times out of 1,000, the response is really, really positive. And the very few times it hasn't been, it was a huge red flag. It's like, that back out of that. If they're not like blown away by that, then what's going on there? There's some problem, right? But yes, you don't want to be presumptive. You don't want to say that, you want to say if it, have I gotten it right? The role that you think you're hiring for here, and what I would be accountable if you were to hire me, or anyone would be accountable if they, in this role. You don't want to act like you have it already, but you want to show that you're taking responsibility and you're already accountable. This is important. I'm going to say one more thing. It's really important. The biggest challenge that employers have is not figuring out whether you're, broadly speaking, a good candidate. That can be figured out pretty quickly looking at your LinkedIn and the first couple of interviews. The question they have, though, is, are you someone who actually gets things done? Are you accountable? Or are you someone who talks and just sits around and nothing happens? The biggest challenge employers have is figuring out the difference between those two kinds of candidates. And it's really hard to do. And if you come in with a job mission with OKRs, you are saying, I am an accountable candidate. I'm an accountable person. I like to get things done. I'm not just a good talker. I'm a doer. And that's true at any level, by the way, from CEO down to first level individual contributor. That as CEO, the kind of doer you are is going to be different than individual contributor, but the challenge is the same. Does that resonate, Gracia and Andy, for you when you're on the other side of this as a hiring person trying to figure out if you want to hire someone?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's exciting. It's inspiring when you see people that are proactive, actually. So yeah, I completely agree. And also, on the other hand, if you send something over and you're not getting that excitement, I think that is a signal as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also like, oh my gosh, the candidate actually thought of a few things that I didn't think of. And so they're actually, they've used their interview process and talking with other people at the company about how to actually, fill the role more effectively than maybe we were originally intending. So I think it's absolutely a very exciting and opportunistic way to get after the job search, for sure.
Yeah.
I like how we unpack what otherwise could be a very nerve-wracking, presumptuous acts to something like what Andrew was summarizing, right? You fill it in after each interview. So you kind of summarize what you learn so that you better understand, the role, and helping to better refine it. So as part of this discovery portion, like what you said, Gracia, to ask better question, to subsequently refine it. But then it also project yourself as being the one who's taking initiative. I don't just, talk, but I walk the talk, right? So it becomes a very effective tool to checking in with hiring manager and gauging the sense of enthusiasm that sort of mutual buy-in from both sides. So I think it's like one tool that serves multiple purpose. Yeah. So I do want to double click on one before we talk about negotiation, which is the third part of today's discussion. Now that we said that this job mission with OKR is so great, what's like a good format? I know, Warren, you should just go to phil.org. There's probably a template there that you can download.
And lots of template with lots of examples of other job missions with OKRs that you can simply copy. But still, let's ask this question. It's great. Andy or Gracia, what would you say?
I use the template, like just using like a Word doc is sufficient enough. And there's a structure in the template that kind of helps you structure that as well. But just writing it down on like a Word doc is helpful.
Yeah, I did exactly the same. So a Word document that really kind of talks through the four different legs of the negotiations tool with a blurb up at the top about what I believe the role is and how it needs to be executed. So not necessarily something that's super long and narrative, but a page, maybe two. But I agree that the templates on phil.org are great as a guide.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome. I think this is a great segue, Andy, as you talk about the four legs of the negotiation. But let's start with the first leg, right? Where everybody think about it is salaries and comp. So equity, bonus, base salary, sometimes it's very nerve wracking, or sometimes, because you went to all the sites to see like, oh, like the base salary is lower than this other company. Like, how do you get yourself educated about like, what's my anticipated rate? Sometimes recruiters ask you up front, right? They send you the expectation. Do you have like sort of best practice do's and don'ts for like how to be smart on at least the salary part of the negotiation, or do you open it up directly to like all the other aspect of a negotiation? How do you navigate the first leg?
You want me to say a few things before you guys jump in? Okay, so the good news is if you put together a job mission with OKRs, before you get the offer, it improves the chances of getting the offer, and then it makes them more excited about working with you, and it gives you negotiating room. And the way I actually propose you do it is you say, look, being successful in this job is the most important thing to me. And so I want to talk to you, employer, about 4 things. Compensation, that's really important. Budget, if it's relevant, if you're going to have a team that you're managing. Resources, including your own and others, resources you can tap into across the company. And support for you, support for your team. We had a recent job seeker who was negotiating training with Marty Kagan for his individual contributors. He was an EVP of product. And they're like, you're negotiating the training of the team you don't even have yet in your salary negotiations? How amazing are you? We want you even more. And so if you present it as a package, first of all, they're going to love it. And then secondly, it actually gives you more leverage to ask for more money. And they're typically more willing to play ball there. Was that your experience, Andy? Like, what can you say?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Phil. So just talking about it as a total package of like, here's what I need to be successful in this role and successful with this team and with this company, rather than like, here's the comp that I want, and then, getting to the other bit. So I really like how you phrased it in terms of coming at it as a total package. And I would say, Chevy, to your question too, for those that might be working with recruiters, I've actually, and it talks about this in the book, we flip the script out with recruiters and say, well, you've had a look at my resume, you understand my background. What do you think a competitive compensation package for somebody like me would be?
Right.
And recruiters are actually super happy to share this information. Again, they won't get down to nitty-gritty specific, but they can give you a sense for the types of candidates they've placed in different industries and different roles, and they're a hugely valuable resource of what competitive compensation, just so you can arm yourself with information that goes maybe a little bit beyond an online search for different pay ranges and such.
I love using recruiter as a source of information, to get market intel.
Yeah.
What about you, Gracia? Any tips on negotiating, how to position it?
Definitely agree. Like, thinking of it, not just the compensation part. I think there's a lot more that comes with that, but also every company, well, not everyone, but like a lot of different companies do it differently. So making sure you're getting all that information up front before you give them a number, because there could be a lot in that compensation package that you're not even.
You and I worked a lot on that, Gracia. We worked a lot on that.
So asking up front before, making that assumption, I think will help you be more successful.
Yeah. You don't want to anchor on a lower number, and this is something, we feel strongly about for everybody, of course. You want, so ask the questions, and this is a delicate moment. And the mistake I see people make, even those who are on a job search council and have been asking for help, is that when they get the offer, they go silent. They're afraid to talk to anybody. They're afraid to ask for help. This is really the most important moment to ask for help. Do not do it alone. Gracia and both of you, we talked through offers as you were negotiating them, just to be a sounding board and help you think about the comp, the equity. Someone asked a question about signing bonus. Well, can you, I help people get signing bonuses all the time. And often I say, is this a deal breaker? Most of the time it's not a deal breaker. So then the way you ask is you say, hey, I'd really like to ask, are you open to discussing a signing bonus? That would make a difference for me. Are you open to discussing a signing bonus? most of the time they're going to say yes. But if they say no, you haven't said, well, you haven't closed the door like it's a deal breaker, unless it is. Very few times it's a deal breaker, but if it is a deal breaker, then you've got to be honest about that. What you don't want to do in negotiations is really say, this is what it's going to take to hire me, and they give it to you, and then you don't go. That can burn a bridge. So if you're going to pull out the deal breaker thing, you better be sure you're going to take that job if they say yes, in my opinion. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're doing it more light, are you open to considering this? Can we talk about that? You're not, and they make the offer, you're not morally obliged to accept it at that point. It's only if you've made the deal a deal breaker. Like, I really, this is what it's going to take, and you've worked, negotiated hard. I don't want you to turn those job offers down, because it just hurts your network. It hurts your reputation. And that's the thing we want to protect over time. It takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind.
Awesome. I want to double click on a couple questions. I know some folks are asking how to get the templates. Again, phil.org. There's, I think, one sign up link and a whole lot of resources in one. So make sure you check that out. And then I want to double click on a couple nuance. I know that this question is related to signing bonus, but it's actually related to the whole, negotiation process. Many times we think about we have more leverage, or we call it betna. I think a more professional term in negotiation is that you have multiple offers, right? You can say, hey, I have this exploding offer that offers me this much. You have to match it, or like some verbiage like that. What's your suggestion? Let's say if you don't have multiple offers, and how can you still make it a productive conversation, right? Where you get what you're asking for, and then make sure that the relationship is good and people are excited to get you started. Any practical tips on that?
Yeah, honestly, I think it goes back to what Phil just talked about, which is if you've had a conversation about your overarching, the four legs of the compensation stool, and you're pretty open and upfront about, a signing bonus is super important to me as it relates to my compensation, then you don't have to get into I have these three other offers, and here's what it starts to slide to be a little bit more transactional, because you want to cultivate a long-standing relationship with this company, even in the sense if you maybe decided to decline the offer, to Phil's point. I think just being upfront about it, about what it would take from a compensation perspective, but then in context to the other three legs of the stool, kind of makes it a more holistic conversation, and not necessarily a transactional one where you're trying to compare the comp sheet, if you will, of other offers you may have.
Yeah.
Make it a total package and the overall framing a narrative. I like that. I want to also double click on one more thing. Let's say if you're VP plus or CEO, director, it's easy for you to negotiate like resources for your team, budget for your team and stuff. But what if you're an entry level person, you're more junior, or let's say you work for a huge company. Actually, JP Morgan is pretty huge, right? Dropbox. How do you also negotiate and get resources that are actually meaningful? So any advice on that?
I'll just jump in real quick on the entry level thing, and then I want Andy and Gracia to talk about the big company question. So I have a story in the book, because college students, if you use Never Search Alone, we have job search councils for college students, right? You're not going to be negotiating budget and resources for the most part when you're taking your first job out of college. And you may not even have much salary wiggle room. They're often very clear stated, this is the salary for the entry level job. But you do have room to negotiate support. So real quick, this college student wanted to go work at a healthcare boutique, decided that was her candidate market fit. It was she decided not to apply to the big firms like McKinsey or Bain or whatever. She wanted something smaller, focused on healthcare. And she was doing interviews. She was creating a job mission. And when she got the offer, she said, listen, this is great, but I want to negotiate what kind of support and training I'm going to get. And what kind of exposure am I going to get to senior leadership? What kind of mentoring am I going to get? How are you going to help me develop? And by the way, they love that question, right? Put yourself again in the employer's shoes. If you're hiring a kid a young person out of college, and they're like, this is great, and I just want to talk to you. How am I going to be mentored? I want to grow. I want to learn. What kind of support? You're like, wow, okay, what? And she got put on the best consulting team with the rising managers. 3 weeks in, she's presenting to the client. Like, she's had a rocket ship experience because she asked, and it blew them away, and they wanted to really support her. Right? It's amazing. And Gracia, in your case, you could negotiate more things, but you did negotiate support as well. Like you were telling your employer there at Dropbox, you wanted support to grow and develop, right? Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah. So I'm part of Collaborative Gains, which is a women's UX group. It's a council where we share a lot about like what's going on in our day to day, but also I think it's a really big area where you can kind of find your voice, right? And I think that's been really important for me. So making sure that I'm sharing that with the hiring manager was really helpful. But also to that question, I think another part that's really important is maybe it's harder to negotiate the salary, but you can ask about how can I grow in this position? Like thinking back when I started, I didn't always ask that. And I think asking that, like if I were to redo it, I would definitely ask that because you want to know that there is potential to grow.
Yeah.
Place you're at. Yeah.
Such a great point. Andy, what would you add?
Honestly, I just a +1. Like I think that's the key thing of whether it's support for mentorship or growth or formal training, depending on what type of a role that you're in. I think asking for that support up front is always, to your point, really well received. And again, I think we say negotiable, but it's almost like the conversation almost turns into like your first 90-day conversation with your senior leader about how you want to onboard the type of support that you're going to need. So it can be as basic as I'd love a really clear 90-day plan and a mentor to help me work through those first 90 days to some of the more formal things that we've talked about here. But in general, most hiring managers are going to be super thrilled about setting those types of structures up for you as you come in.
I love how do you grow in that position as a way to frame kind of like what kind of support can I get, and thinking beyond the budget, the resource, right? Maybe it's quarterly lunch with a very important leader who can set you up for success in an organization. So those are the things. I think being resourceful and being creative, and then that kind of question, the kind of framing you ask, how can I grow the best in that role, also project you as someone who's very sincere, who's taking the initiative, right, to continue to drive, and you're on the same side with the hiring team, even when you're negotiating.
That's so important, Shivi, on the same side.
Awesome. I think we're coming up on time. There was one maybe very technical question I think we touch upon a little bit, but I'll just bring it up because, sometimes it's very nerve-wracking that people ask you for a specific salary range that you're looking for. We talked about making it, as part of an overall narrative, how to support and all that stuff. But just very technically, do you give the number? Do you give a range? I know, Andy, you mentioned about asking recruiter and getting smart about potentially getting that number. Is that how you would suggest to say it? Or how specific do you want to get down to when it comes to first leg of a negotiation, like that salary piece?
Yeah, I mean, I do think just doing some due diligence and doing some research, whether it's a recruiter or, again, back to your network, if you've got leaders that, friends that are managing teams, or just asking your network about, hey, what's a competitive salary in your space for this kind of a role, and doing some of that upfront research. And then I think, at least for me, and this has been my mileage, I'd love, Phil, Gracia, if you have a point of view here of like, I've generally given a broad range to say like, hey, here's kind of what my understanding of a competitive range is. I'd love to talk with you more about how my experience and my background apply to that range. And then as the conversation continues, you kind of, you get down to what your core compensation number is. But I've generally tried to do as much research as I can with people, in other companies or within my network that can help me get a sense for what is an appropriate range based on, again, background, experience, desire, all those types of things. And then kind of, again, take it down from there. But again, just not to sound like a broken record, but in context to the other 4 legs, right? So I know it's always nerve-wracking to have that comp number on that leg of the stool, but just having that conversation with that research, but again, in context with the other legs of the stool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I found it sometimes challenging not to say something. So if you are, be prepared, like, talk to your network, ask what's the market doing, in the role that you're looking for, and then you're able to come with a range. But if you don't do that, I would definitely hold off and kind of turn it around and be like, ask them, essentially.
Yeah. And you can ask and then you don't say anything and let it be awkward for a moment and let them step in. And by the way, there are now laws, right? So many of you know this in California, New York, and where companies actually have to publish the salary. Now, in some cases, it's not helpful because they'll say $50,000 to $500,000. Like, well, it's like, okay, that's a wild range, right? But more and more, you can do exactly what you just said, Gracia. Just say, oh, yeah, well, I was hoping you would tell me what you're looking to do here.
Yeah.
And then just be quiet.
All right. I also sometimes think it's for one of the question was asking, hey, what if you, let's say, are a pivoter or you work in a field that don't pay as well, and then like you're kind of like the bottom 25 percentile, like how do you better position yourself for more high paying jobs? I would just say, like, sometimes you don't have to disclose how much you're paying right now, right? You can say, hey, for my quality, my skill set, here's the market range, is what I'm looking to grow, without really reviewing how much I'm being paid right now. At least that's a couple of years ago. That's how my approach to avoid that awkward conversation about reviewing how much I'm being paid. But I'll tell them, here's what I'm looking for, but I'm open to learn, again, the other resources, right? Like, I'm hoping to learn, I'm hoping to grow. So even though this is my expected range, I'm open to conversation. So don't close the door just because if you couldn't hit that number. I think the benefit of that is, like, again, anchoring in negotiation, right? So you anchor high, but then creating rooms to, like, meeting somewhere in the middle. I think that's probably, I find that as the best spot for me. All right, we're coming up at time, and I think it's been really great. Like Mary was saying, that all the tips we're giving about entry-level young folks coming in, how can they be resourceful, what kind of support they can ask for, it has been really, really brilliant and fabulous. So thank you so much for sharing, Andy and Gracia and Phil. All right, we're coming up at time pretty closely.
Are we coming to the end of our 4-part series? Oh, Shivy.
Time flies. Let's close it strong by maybe going round table. Each one of you can maybe give 1 or 2 parting advice to our dear job seekers out there, who might be urgently seeking, right? Some of them in this very tough climate right now. What are some of your biggest advice to them?
Yeah. Well, of course, mine is the title of the book, Never Search Alone. Join a job search council. It's free. We're going to set you up, give you training and support. And those of you who are on job search councils, back me up here in the chat. For the folks who aren't, we have a volunteer team. We want to help as many people as we can in the world. The book is dedicated to my mom, who started the first council in 1960, and she died 10 years ago. And an absolutely fabulous human being and someone who really gave a lot to the world. I just want to show you a picture of her. This is a photo of her in high school at Van Nuys High in California. And so that's why we're building a volunteer-driven free community. It's in the spirit of my mom, whose nickname was Chick, C-H-I-C, Chick. So in the spirit of Chick, join our free community. We'll set you up with a job search council and give you all the help that you need. So that's my one tip.
I would definitely add to everything Bill said. That's crucial. But besides that, like when I was thinking about all this, I think creating connections, whether it's in your current job, your future job, a networking event, wherever it may be, I think relationships are key to your career and just overall super critical. So that's parting advice.
Yeah, +1 to both of those. But then I would also say, be patient, trust yourself, trust your instincts about, what you're seeing, what you're learning. And I think, again, like we get nervous and we want to jump into the next thing or the next rod or sending out tons of emails all day long. But I think just part of it is just, slowing down. Never Search Alone has a great structure and process to follow, but just, be patient, trust your instincts associated to the Never Search Alone and have the network, I think, are two things. And I would say, we all have anxiousness, we all have anxiety over these processes. And I'd say just, go for it, as your authentic self is the parting shot, I would say.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think we got a lot of shout out from the community as well. Willie said it's the best decision to join a job search council. You'll not regret it. Justin is saying that, yes, Job Search Council is, give you emotional support, never search alone, but holds you accountable and it's a good sounding board. So like you said, like Andy, trust your instincts, talk to your friend, trust the process, right? Yes, it's nerve wracking. It's, everybody feel nervous and it's a vulnerable time during job search, right?
Really
You're going to feel a lot of imposter syndrome coming in. You're going to get criticized. Sometimes you feel good because you get multiple, like you're going through an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
Having a group of people to be there for you, supporting you, is really, really comforting, as one of the LinkedIn user was saying. And then, yeah, people love this series. Job Search Console is great. And yeah, I guess I'll just end with Job Search, a 4-letter word. So go to field.org and sign up for free resources. And thank you for all of you for joining us today. Again, if you missed any of the former part, just go to the About or Detail section where you will see all the links. Copy and paste them into your browser so that you can rewatch them. And thank you so much again.
Can I just ask? I just want to say, can we all give Shivi a round of applause for the amazing work she's done this 4-part series? Really, your leadership in the product community on LinkedIn and around the world is amazing, Shivi. We all owe you a debt of gratitude. And of course, I want to thank our two guests today, Andy and Gracia, who came to share on this 4th session. But really, my heart goes out to you, Shivi. You really have been an amazing leader and moderator, facilitator, and organizer of the product community. We all owe you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored. Yeah. Good luck, everybody. I know it's a really tough time out there. So, hanging there, never search alone, right? Find your partner, find your job search console, and keep going. I hope to hear good news from a lot of folks. Maybe some will become our panelists for future sessions as they share their learnings. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right.
All right.
Thank
you, Andy and Gracia.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Hey, Andy and Gracia,
Bye.
hang on for a moment after we,